Yeah, you have to prove the job. You still have to do the job. I'm with you. I'm with you. Oh, actually, it's not just Butler. It's a partnership program. From what he told me, it's like it's not just them with pay. Yeah, exchange for like. Yeah. We still play the thing to us.
Do we know who just joined us?
Oh, that's nice.
Katie? Oh, Katie from transfer. Is there a way to like look at that box to see if all of
That's why. When she's studying in Butler, music. Well, they also. Yeah. But no. Oh. That's like, I don't know if it's programs, therapy. I really know because at least so it makes the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, she is.
Okay. I'm so fascinated.
Get started.
I mean, I actually was going to get there for a semester, then I just graduated.
Morning.
Everybody, we're gonna get started. So, Jen, you want to go ahead? We'll do introductions and go around.
I'm Sarah. I'm an admin with CIRTA.
I'm Greg Henneke, Structure Point, and Save Indianapolis.
Nathan Messer, Boone County and Town of Whitestone.
Jerry Bridges, Anderson MPO of Madison County.
Jennifer Gebhard, CIRTA.
Ann Poindexter, accountant for CIRTA.
Andrew Lyman, City of Indianapolis.
Ann Scheidler with Hancock County.
Rob Wagner, Amalgamated Transit.
Larry Hudson, Hendricks County.
Don Adams, Morgan County. Ron Deere, Johnson County.
Ryan Wilhite, Indigo.
Annie Dixon, Indianapolis MPO.
Philip Roth, American Structure Point.
Abby Okeson, Hirons.
Thank you. Those online.
Linda Sanders, Shelby County Council.
We've got David Johnson from TransPro. We had Sarah from CIRTA, and I don't know the.
Yeah, so on the far left, that is Lori. Lori is our newest outreach representative. Lori, meet the board.
And Lori.
Lori has joined us moved here a few months ago from San Diego, and he's already knocking it out of the park, and we appreciate him. Are there any other board members online?
We do have Cinda as well, and Katie as well. She's from TransPro.
We do have a quorum.
The person just joined. That's Amanda.
That's Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Program manager.
Yeah. Good to see you. So go ahead and get started. We have the consent agenda items. If you've had a chance to look through them, we normally just do this by resolution willing to accept motion for resolution 2023-08-15-01 for adoption of the consent agenda.
Second.
Moved by Greg and seconded by Nathan. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those
Aye.
online?
No, you got to.
Oh, that's, sorry, Ann. Okay. Greg votes aye.
Nathan, aye.
Jerry, aye.
Andrew Kleiman, aye.
Ann Scheidler, aye.
Rob Wagner, aye.
Larry Hudson, aye.
Don Adams, aye. Ron Deere, aye.
Linda?
Linda Sanders, aye.
Thank you. Motion carries, resolution adopted. New business, First one is resolution 2023-08-15-02, resolution to approve American Structure Point invoice. You got it.
Second.
Motion by Larry, seconded by Rob. Roll call. Go ahead, Greg.
Greg refuses himself.
Nathan, I.
Gary, aye.
Andrew Klein, aye.
Deanna and I.
Rob Wagner, aye.
Yes, and I.
Don Adams, aye. Ron Deere, aye.
Linda?
Linda Sanders, I.
Thank you. Next item up is resolution 2023-08-15-03, which is resolution to approve technology study for County Connect. Jen, you want to just give a real quick update on that?
Yeah, so hopefully all of you are familiar with the technology study that we started for CIRTA.
Cam just joined up.
Okay, please note that Cam Sarge just joined the meeting. Okay, so we are on resolution 2023-8-15-03, and this is for approval to approve a technology study for the County Connect program. As many of you know, we started this study and this program back using SRF Consulting to take a look at what a regional technology solution would be for all of the transportation providers in the region. So right now, as it stands, people have to call multiple agencies for coordination, take multiple trips. And the study was started quite a few years ago. And as we've been working through the process, we identified that although SRF had completed everything through their original scope, there was a component of the study that was missing, and that component specifically was a feasibility study. And we had additional funding that was still available from this grant. This is 100% funded grant. It was a part of the CARES Act funding. And Philip and from American Structure Point and Dave Krieg on our team, the mobility manager, has been very involved with the County Connect team, and TransPro is going to be the individual that we are recommending to complete this feasibility study. We did reach out to 3 different organizations for quotes for the study. In addition to TransPro, we reached out to TY Lin or Sam Schwartz at TY Lin Company and Iteris, which is an organization that was working and doing some work with the Indianapolis MPO. Philip, would you have anything else to add to it, or does anybody have any questions? This would be a resolution to approve a contract with TransPro for $61,973 that would be 100% funded through the CARES Act grant.
I have a question.
Sure.
I don't know if I got the acronym. SR. Yes, is that what?
SRF.
As a company.
That was an organization that did some previous legwork for this project.
Right, and that was the one where they were talking about dispatch and the others. So where did that go?
They were scoped to produce a request for proposals that we would issue for getting vendors to propose to us for some kind of centralized technology initiative. They fulfilled their part of the scope and got us the request for proposals. However, when we received it, there were some critical scope items from our assessment that were missing, particularly what would the institutional arrangements look like once this is implemented? How would it cost? Who would be involved with it? How would it be phased in? These critical questions were deemed to be essential to proceeding forward with the RFP. We still may proceed with the RFP, but what we're asking TransPro to do is to go back and take a look at some of the elements that are missing from an organizational perspective. It seems like SRF was looking at this strictly from a technology perspective, and not really addressing what the organizational requirements were going to be. So that's what we're trying to backfill with this contract. The only thing I would add, Jen, is that we did reach out to SRF out of a courtesy. They did not reply with any kind of a quote or response. And we did have conversations. We know that there are multiple initiatives taking place over the region. We know that some organizations in Hamilton County and Johnson County are looking at the procurement of new scheduling software. We know that Indigo is looking at new fare management systems. We're not trying to step on anyone's toes with this study, but rather look at ways to kind of integrate all these different components and see how we can regionalize them.
So they submitted their conclusions to CIRTA staff, but I don't recall the board ever having that kind of. We had that one presentation that I recall. Was there another one I missed?
And they've actually had about 3. And they, and Bill alluded to the fact that the one thing that really wasn't requested of them was if this were to become a reality, and we wanted to go to some kind of central shared services, whatever it could be, dispatch or anything else, how do you form it from a structural perspective organizationally? How do you fund it and everything else? That's like, you got us where we need to be on one sense, but we didn't go to the next step. So if we want to go to the next step, we would need to do this. And the other thing is that you've got some of the individual counties right now looking at new service software in terms of maybe dispatching and some other things. Now would be a good opportunity to see if they might all come on board with even if it's nothing more than a common platform. It's better than what we have now, where we're on multiple platforms. And if you get a few and we test it out and it works, then it might be a good thing long term for everybody to come in, because it will save us money long term if it's centralized. And one of the issues that they've had even prior to COVID, most of them have one dispatcher. That dispatcher is sick. Usually the supervisor ends up doing that. For our service that we have in Madison County, if anybody's sick, it's the supervisor that fills in, and they've got a lot on their plate to begin with. Now all of a sudden you're going to dump it up the responsibility. So yeah, and it's been hard repeatedly in transit nationally to get staffing at all levels. So I hope that answered your question, Ron.
Yeah.
Does anybody else on the board have any questions that they may have?
I was just thinking that I know that you guys at Indigo do dispatching for rides, different kinds of service. I'm hoping that we'll have these guys investigate that system and see if there's some stuff we can.
Yes. That is the plan, for sure.
That is a good question. Great, so thank you. If we don't have any other questions, entertain a motion for resolution 2023-08-15-03 to approve technology study for County Connect. A motion? Approval.
Andrew.
Motion by Andy. Second by Rob. All those in favor?
Greg says yes.
Nathan, yes.
Jerry, yes.
Andy, yes.
And yes.
Rob, yes.
Larry, yes.
I have yes. Ron, yes.
Linda?
Linda, yes.
Cam?
Cam, yes.
Welcome, Cam. Thank you. Next item up is resolution 2023-08-15-04. Resolution to approve a contract for ride sharing software and service. Jen, do you have?
Yeah, sure. So CIRTA, throughout the years, we have used a database to connect people in the community with one another for carpooling and vanpooling. It's our primary database. Our contract is up for renewal. So this is we went through the process of getting a couple quotes and getting a demo from an organization called Agile Mile. They provide a carpool database as well as our current provider. Through the resolution is basically to recommend continuing with RedPro for another year for our carpool database system. This is using 100% CMAQ dollars through our Commuter Connect program. Prices between the procurements were pretty similar, except the biggest difference was that Agile Mile didn't support two things that were really critical for us as an agency. One of those being it did not support a school pool database. So school pool is where we match families with other families throughout the region at different schools to connect them for carpooling and transportation system. And it also didn't support a CRM feature. For those of you who might not be familiar with the CRM feature, we use RidePro to update all of our marketing notes. So anytime we go out in the community and connect with an employer, have a meeting, all of that historical data is in that database. So my recommendation is to move the contract forward. It's a contract not to exceed $37,000 for the year for the database. Does anybody have any questions?
No questions of Jen. Entertain a motion to approve resolution 2023-08-15-04 to approve contract for ride sharing software and service. Have a motion.
So moved.
Nathan, second by Greg. Roll call, Greg.
Nathan, I.
Jerry, I.
Andy Klein and I.
And
Rob White, aye.
Larry Hessen, aye.
Scott Adams, aye. Ron Deere, aye.
Linda,
Linda Sanders, I.
Cam.
Cam, I.
Thank you. Next up is resolution 2023-08-15-05, a resolution to approve agreement with contract and refresh service strategic plan. Janet and
yeah, sure. So CIRTA has had some grant money that's been sitting for quite some time with the intent to look at CIRTA's strategic plan and to refresh its strategic plan. This grant money, if we don't use it, is going to expire in March. So there's a lot of current changes happening with CIRTA. With respects, we refreshed our strategic plan a couple years ago when the previous director was here. It included information in it that was never left for my vision, including like a clean energy study, things to that extent. So we reached out to a couple of vendors to get quotes for this study, and I am going to be recommending that we seek a contract with TransPro Consulting to refresh our strategic plan. It's a $37,500 request. $38,000 of that is federal money, $7,500 of that is general fund money. And I'm gonna let David Johnson from TransPro Consulting kind of talk a little bit about what they proposed, and then we can take it for other discussion.
Thanks, Jen. Good morning, David Johnson, TransPro Consulting. I'll be the project leader on the proposed, all three of the projects actually that we're engaged with TransPro on. So continuity across strategic planning, the technology implementation plan, and then of course the current workforce connector study. So our approach with strategic planning is to take the current document and refresh it. Obviously leadership has changed. Some of the initiatives have been adjusted a little bit. And so we're gonna take a little bit of time to engage with you all, go through our time-tested process for strategic planning that's really focused on public entities and specifically even more than that, transportation agencies, and go through a process of identifying goals and tactics and developing a work plan that will set Jen and the team up for success for the remainder of the plan's term.
Anybody else have questions of David? Or Jen?
What's the timing on like the deliverable?
So once we engage, we'll start with an assessment beyond what we've already done for workforce connectors. So, looking a little bit deeper at CIRTA's budgets and bylaws, and engaging with you all sort of in one-on-one interviews about broader issues beyond the study we're currently working on. Then we'll do, that'll be the first month after we're ready to proceed. And then the month after that would be a facilitated board workshop where we would come together in person and talk about, what revisit the mission statement, vision if we need to, but really focusing on looking at the current plan, what needs to be kept, what needs to be replaced or updated, and then developing later with staff, the actual strategic plan in month 3. And then we're also adding in a communication strategy. CIRTA's role in the region is sometimes not completely understood. And so whatever strategy comes out of that process will be put into the strategic plan, into the communications plan, and the existing PR team will be part of that task and helping the staff roll that out and make sure people understand what CIRTA's role is in Central Indiana and specifically with mobility options so that you can bring those regions, additional parts of the region in and grow the services you provide.
Yeah, first part of 2024, roughly.
Yeah, we have to be done by March.
You have to have it spent or just obligated.
Spent.
My memory's not too great, but and maybe we were a few months ago, or maybe several months ago, we had some conversation about whether the last rollout of the strategic plan was handled the right way by our previous director. Are we making sure we do it the right way this time, whatever the right way is?
Yes.
What is the right? What's different?
It's basically a public meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a private meeting.
Yes.
It's actually here.
And I think having the workshop, we had one before, but this is a lot more focused on our structure, budget. What I think probably should be more focused. So, good question though.
We need to make sure we do it right?
Yeah.
That's good.
Do we have any other questions of either David or Jen? If not, I'll entertain a motion for Resolution 2023-08-15-05 to approve an agreement with contractor to refresh CIRTA strategic plan. Approval. That's by Andrew. Second by Larry. Go ahead.
Greg says yes.
Greg says yes.
Nathan, yes.
Jerry, yes.
Andrew Kleinman, aye.
Ann Schuyler, yes.
Rob Wagner, aye.
Larry Hessen, aye.
Tom Adams, aye. Ron Deere, aye.
Linda?
Linda Sanders, I.
Pam?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Motion's carried. Next item up is Resolution 2023-08-15-06, resolution to amend certain procurement policies. We're going to have Jen actually give you an update on this and where it's at.
Yeah, so first of all, we're not going to be seeking any kind of formal action on this resolution at this meeting, but we wanted to have a discussion about our thought process so far as a team and kind of go from there. We are going to be working with Ann to make sure we know how and what we want to do moving forward. So there's been discussion to look at launching a pilot program as the workforce connector study is kind of taking place, and we're going to hear about those recommendations here from TransPro in a few minutes. And one of those would be the Plainfield EID has agreed to pay for a pilot program. And Royal Transportation has agreed to potentially run that pilot program. And that pilot program would not be using any federal dollars. And there was discussion if we could change our procurement policy to allow a pilot to occur under those circumstances to, and David, are you still online? Wait, Transpro?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And, you know, we were talking with Anne about this policy and there were some concerns that it potentially might not meet our state regulations, and we still need to look into some of that a little bit further. But ideally, David, I don't know, other agencies across the country have implemented very similar policies as they're trying to work with different technology solutions to run these pilots. So David, I don't know if you can provide any more historical background on it, but again, we won't be seeking action today on the resolution, but did want to have a discussion further.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. Absolutely. So one of my jobs at the Kansas City Area Transportation Authority was to pilot a lot of these technologies. And prior to my arrival there, leadership adopted some language that was in use at some other agencies and that had been really kind of blessed by FTA. FTA has acknowledged that and has even set up some of its innovative pilot programs that are using federal dollars with special rules that acknowledge that agencies don't know what they don't know. And in order to make better procurements, you have to try something before you buy it. And that's very difficult in a traditional full and open procurement framework. So what this does is it puts some guardrails around pilots where you would not use federal money and the term of the pilot would be limited and the cost of the pilot would be limited, and there would be some sort of board engagement in the approach decision, but not necessarily the approval, because again, the flexibility to quickly make some technology tests, again, to inform a future full and open procurement. So that's innovation, and we like to use that word, but this is a real practical way for public agencies to be innovative with technology that's constantly evolving. And most agencies, especially transit agencies, don't have a big technology bench of people who can help sort the wheat from the chaff, if you will, and make sure they make good decisions that don't backfire operationally or financially later.
So if I may, the reason why you were not being asked to act on it today is, as wonderful as it sounds, and it sounds wonderful to me too, understands that federal dollars carry federal regulations on procurement, but you're a municipal corporation, which means you're a political subdivision, which means that you were subject to Indiana procurement regulations. And so we need just a little bit more time. I need a little bit more understanding about what they're acquiring to see if I can fit them into some little niche in the procurement, Indiana procurement regulations when they use Indiana dollars, not federal dollars, to make sure that this really works the way they want it to work before we ask you to approve it.
Considering that, my memory may not be correct. For some reason, I'm thinking of $50,000 signification in all my experiences, or that may have just been a county decision. But I thought it was for 50,000, you had to do X.
Well, there are lots of different thresholds depending on what you were talking about. I mean, that's part of the issue, Ron, is depending on what exactly we're talking about, we may be able to go to a different rule. There are emergency rules. I mean, can we creatively call it an emergency and go to the emergency rule? I mean, there's all kinds of different parts, and unfortunately, we collectively need a little more time, and I need a little more education about what they're trying to do so that I can figure out whether I can fit them in a little part to do it.
So that threshold might change.
Yeah, and they do change regularly.
If it's professional services, there is no
threshold on it. So yeah, whether it falls under, hey, it's a professional service award, because if it's state money, there is no, we do it all the time. And I don't say structure point just because it's, we awarded a $700,000 contract to them and there's no procurement, it's professional services. But if we go buy something over $5,000, we've got other steps we have to follow.
Did you know that you can pay your lawyer as much as you want to? To do.
Seconded.
That I know.
Are there any more questions of either David or Ann or Jen? In regards to this? Okay, this is just an information item today. We will take action next board meeting, which will be in October. And by that time, hopefully Ann and Jen have it all sorted out. We're ready to go. So thank you all very much. Next item up is presentation by TransPro Consulting on service recommendations for the workforce connectors. So David.
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for the time. We've got an update for you on our workforce connector study. We basically have a service recommendation for you to think about as we move forward to completing the study this year, and some potential service changes to the two routes themselves. So with that, I'll go ahead and start sharing our presentation. Whoever's running the Zoom, could you enable that?
That work?
Nope. There we go. Thank you. The awkward pause, waiting for technology. All right. So what we're going to talk about this morning, just a very brief introduction and talk about what we heard from talking to you all and other stakeholders for the services, and a brief recap of the current service. But we're really going to spend most of our time this morning on the recommendation itself. We know you'll have questions, and we're here to answer them. And then we'll talk a little bit about next steps before we wrap. We think this will probably take about 30 minutes. So obviously we were hired by CIRTA in the spring to assess the two routes that are branded workforce connectors that serve Plainfield and Whitestown and are primarily funded by economic improvement districts that were set up for that purpose. The goal of each service, of course, is to connect workers throughout central Indiana to jobs in each community via connections to the existing bus network. So this presentation is giving you, some background on the service, the proposed definition of success, which is a sort of a pillar of TransPro's work with public agencies. Define your success in advance and then stick to that throughout the process. And then, of course, new service concepts that will result in some final recommendations. So what we heard from our outreach initially with interviews, it was a little hard to get kind of everybody in. We didn't hear a sort of common thread until we went back to the forming documents for each EID. And thankfully, they were pretty much in sync with each other. And that led us to that Plainfield and Whitestown workforce connectors should demonstrate value to EID employers by helping attract and retain workers with affordable transportation to jobs that provides a positive customer experience. And the connection to the interviews, we've highlighted those in italics. So value, affordable, and a positive customer experience, whether it's from reduced travel time or showing values to those who are paying rates into the district. That was really important. So then we conducted a brief survey to get a little bit more information from EID stakeholders themselves, the people that are ratepayers or contributors to the cost of service. And we put that success definition in front of them in the survey, and wide agreement, and also agreement that transportation is a valuable service to the districts themselves. They noted some barriers to using the service as it's designed today. It takes too long, not available during the days and times when workers need it. And then third, that sometimes the service can be unreliable. And then we also asked them to rank the elements of service. So travel time, again, coming to the top of the list. You'll hear that throughout the presentation today. On-time arrivals, safety and security, less walking to the bus stop, from the bus stop to the job site, infrastructure like shelters and benches, and then the frequency of service, which is currently hourly. So to summarize, we settled on this success definition, and from that we extracted 3 goals: improving travel time, increasing job access, and increasing ridership. We heard from quite a few people that they didn't want to see empty buses, and the decline in ridership over time is a concern. So the current service is focused on lower density warehouse districts. These buildings have large setbacks, and the streets are big and wide, to accommodate trucks that are loading and unloading equipment and product. There are sidewalks, but some of the bus stops are not connected to them, or they're actually in grass or drainage ditches. It's just a product of allowing construction to be built without sidewalks or without sidewalk connectivity. But that is evolving. Ridership has declined since peaking in late 2019. Obviously, the pandemic had a role here, but also there was a service reduction in early 2023, driven by a provider cost increase that came back from the bidding process. And that was a result of increased labor and maintenance costs from the current vendor. All vendors, actually. Customer travel times are indeed long and require multiple transfers depending on what part of the metro you're coming from. The wait times are exacerbated by some of the transfers don't perfectly line up just because they're 2 low frequency services connecting to each other and operated by different agencies. And so while there has been effort to sync those schedules up, there still are, sometimes a 20-minute wait. And so Plainfield and Whitestown EID revenue has also increased since forming in 2020, and everyone sort of agrees that they're projected to continue increasing in the near future. So again, the existing service is a fixed route on a fixed schedule, shown here on the map. You can see geographically where the 2 districts are in relation to downtown, which is where the bulk of Indigo service is and where transfers occur. And so the buses stop at all stops with 10 seconds of dwell time. That's actually contractually required. There are reasons for that. But it does lead to, sort of an extended period as it's running through the districts themselves. There is 1 morning express run for each service. That is also the most crowded run of the day, looking at ridership statistics. So we think there's value in looking at more of that, also to reduce the travel time. The service is currently hourly. So if you miss, your planned departure, it's another hour at the same bus stop before you can catch it again. And by the time you get to work, you're probably going to be late. So it's really important that there be clarity in the service if it's going to run hourly. Also, 1 vehicle is operating at all times on each route with a capacity of up to 24 passengers. That is a $1 fare, and there are no transfer. The transfer, you don't get any free transfer when going from Indigo service to the workforce connectors. So you're actually paying the Indigo bus route cost plus the workforce connectors 2 ways if you're going to and from work every day. So that can add up. Here we show the service area. I think we've seen this quite a bit. This is where the bus stops are located and kind of, what the cycle is through each area. It does run in a loop. So our recommendation after looking at all of the existing ridership, talking to people, visiting the site, both sites, and kind of looking at all the different options within the realm of transit, we are recommending that the service be transitioned to demand response. So what that means is that instead of a fixed route and fixed schedule where the customer does a lot of the work, where they have to look at the schedule, understand what time they have to be there, walk to the bus stop, be there early enough to catch the bus because it doesn't exactly always arrive, at the clock time referenced in the schedule, and then walk once they get on the bus, pay the fare, walk to, go to the next bus stop where they're departing, and then walk to their destination. With demand response, it's more what we call curb to curb, and you're basically operating more like a taxi. Although within public transit, demand response specifically focuses on pooling those trips so that you're not just emulating taxi service exactly. So paratransit, if you're familiar with that, is a demand response service usually, as are things like you've heard of microtransit or Uber Pool is sort of a, because they're mixing people in the same vehicle on multiple trips with the same vehicle and driver, that would be kind of just considered demand response as well. And we would be operating those within each district. So, much like the routes are separate today, although they do connect downtown for those express trips, they would still be operating in this recommended model as well, so operating separately. What we're trying to do is address that travel time with more express trips from DTC to increase those direct Indigo connections. So right now, the Plainfield service connects to one infrequent bus route, and Whitestown connects to two infrequent bus routes. So by going to downtown more often throughout the day, you'll be able to connect to, I don't even know how many connect at downtown, but a lot more. And you'll be able to, pick up people and get them to the jobs faster. And we won't be duplicating Indigo service because we won't be allowing pickups between downtown and the existing transfer points of Bridgeport Road. And we're going to be recommending a different transfer point for Whitestown. But between those two transfer points in downtown, the workforce connectors would not be picking people up. The customer experience, quite different than fixed route. So customers have to request a trip by providing their origin and destination address or a landmark via a mobile app, website, or by phone. These services existed for a long time, and so most of them have been by phone reservations. And you may have heard them referred to as dial-a-ride in a lot of places around the US. And that's because, now we have new options driven by the internet and mobile phones that allow, like a native mobile app or website to do that booking, which could also be done 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even though the service isn't running, where someone may not be available to pick up the phone. But for phone requests, CIRTA will support those with their existing phone number and during existing business hours with existing staff. That's the plan. And so we'll see how that goes. And then we're also proposing that the contractor accept trip requests after hours while the service is running, not necessarily all day long. And then of course, making this shift, what you now see as the printed schedule, that would no longer exist because there won't be a schedule. It will all be based on the trip requests for that day and throughout the day. So it will look very different from an operations perspective. And on operations, we are proposing 2 vehicles instead of 1. We tried really hard to see what would work with 1 vehicle and getting downtown more often to reduce that long travel time, but it just doesn't work. And so at least it doesn't work if you also want to drop people off at their employers. So the runtime between downtown and the sort of edge of the Indigo network is 30 minutes. And so in an hour, 1 vehicle simply cannot cycle back and forth to downtown and drop people off at their destinations. So the second vehicle will allow each vehicle to go downtown if requested and drop people off not only at the existing bus stops, but at places that may be actually contributing to the EID, but don't have bus stops today. So we're adding job access geographically and also improving the travel time, which increases job access as well. And since this 2-vehicle proposal would cost more, significantly more, we're proposing that we use smaller vehicles, and that would generate, a requirement that the driver not have a commercial driver's license. And that's a pretty easy change to make because with 2 vehicles, you can actually accommodate more total people than with just a single vehicle, even though it's 24 passengers today. The dispatching technology, and this is where that other project kind of comes into play, looking beyond this study. would determine route and customer pickup and drop off on a daily basis. That's sort of the manifest, as we call it. And the dispatching is actually mostly automatic. No one has to sit there and figure out how the trips connect to each other and how that would work every day. That's how it used to be done. But now we have smart machines that can kind of figure that out. And every vendor has its own algorithm that they claim is the best. But we'll do our best to again, determine which one is going to work for this service. So another recap here about demand response. You have the trip request. Dispatching kind of puts all those trip requests together and decides where the vehicle is going to go and sort of in what sequence throughout the day. And then the actual customer pickup and drop off. And again, we're really focusing on more access to downtown for better connections and faster trips. And then within the pickup and drop off sort of space, within each EID, we can make what's called a virtual bus stop, which doesn't physically exist with infrastructure, but would exist based on the trips requested for that day. So if 5 people are all going to the Amazon front door, that's a bad example because I actually don't want the vehicle on property, but a location that isn't currently a bus stop, the system can create a virtual bus stop based on those trip requests, and everybody gets off there. Maybe there's a little bit of walking, but it saves the vehicle from going to drop off 5 people that are kind of going to places that are near each other. More service directly to more job sites. And of course, we can always take advantage of the existing physical bus stops, but that won't be necessary. Just a couple of notes on the prior steps here. Trip reservations, it's up to the agency to kind of decide what policies it will put in place for trip requests. So subscriptions, which would be a regular same time, same pickup, same drop off. So you don't have to request each trip 5 days a week if you're just going to a shift inside the Plainfield EID, for example. And then of course how much time advance time is required for reservations, whether it's 24 hours or 30 minutes or something different. And then we're also really focusing because these jobs are shift driven. So arrival time is really important. It's more important than departure time and probably even travel time. And so we're looking for a technology partner for a pilot to test this out that will really focus on getting people to work on time. And there are vendors that do that, and we're talking to them actively now. I'll pause for a little bit on, that was a lot of information about demand response service and how that works. Any questions for us on what this would mean to CIRTA, the EIDs, or customers?
Any questions?
I have a couple questions. So is something like this simple? Are there other cities that have something like you're describing, similar to what you're describing, and they can afford to do it?
Yeah, so what you may have heard the word microtransit. We're intentionally not using that word because we're not wanting to give people the impression that this will definitely be an on-demand service like Uber and Lyft, but this is widely used throughout the country. It's actually used even in the counties that CIRTA serves, so Hamilton, some of the others that run, they don't call them demand response, but they operate the same way, and sometimes they're already using technology for dispatching. Sometimes they're not. They're doing it by hand, but this is widely used throughout transit across the U.S. And it's sort of an acknowledgement that we've built places that aren't well served by traditional fixed route transit. Like the middle of downtown Indianapolis, or some of the more urban neighborhoods that have, things are kind of closer together, and they're, a contiguous sidewalk network. So this sort of acknowledges that, there's a different land use pattern, and we could do something that's not necessarily more cost efficient, but does address mobility in a better way so that you're not forcing people to walk really long distances in places that aren't necessarily conducive to that.
So, how much cheaper are drivers that don't have CDLs than drivers that do? If you have to have two drivers instead of one, are they half as expensive?
Unfortunately, no, and that's shifting pretty rapidly in the industry. Wages are in flux, not just in transit, but everywhere. And so we will, and this is a contracted service, so we'll be subject to the private sector's ability to recruit and retain staff to do the work, as you are today with the Royal contract. And we saw the cost increase that came from that, and a lot of that was labor. And so we'll have to see what the industry comes back with when we start talking to them after we have a recommended option. But it is not half the price, unfortunately. In fact, during bidding for the last contract, one firm submitted a bid using smaller vehicles kind of with this approach. We're kind of leveraging that, and we reference it later in this presentation. So I think it was $99 per service hour versus $111 what we're paying Royal. So yeah, I mean, a little bit of savings, but when you spread that over a schedule, it can really add up.
That response does not mean off route pickup. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we did look at a deviated fixed route option where essentially it would be a line on a map, a fixed route, and with a fixed schedule, but it would have a schedule that would allow deviation from the line on the map to pick people up at specific locations. But again, it didn't really seem to really solve the travel time issue. And if you're not having to stop at every scheduled bus stop, that gives the vehicle flexibility to quickly go through the EID. Maybe all 15 passengers are going to the Kohl's distribution center or something. So that's just one stop for that vehicle, and then it can quickly head back downtown without having to be required to hit all the other bus stops.
So if you have multiple people who are going to the same location, but it's demand response when they call in. I mean, if they call in at 7, or if they arrange one at 7 or one at 7:20, 7:30, how does the bus get to them without deviating from their where they want to arrive at?
So that's where the focusing on the preferred arrival time comes in. We're talking to one vendor who specializes in arrival time versus pickup time and wait time. And so if someone says, I need to be at this distribution center by 7 a.m., then what will change will not be the arrival time, it will be the pickup time. So as additional trip requests come in and they all need to be somewhere by 7 a.m., you're going to get there by 7 a.m., at least the vendor claims, but the pickup time may be earlier, or you might be dropped off a lot earlier because another person who's on the same path for that trip, also needs to be somewhere by 7. So your arrival time might actually be 6:50, and the next person who's a little bit down the road will be 6:55. But everybody's going to get there by 7 in this scenario.
To do something like what you're talking about, I know there's not a lot of detail, specific detail. Do we have, I assume we'll have to coordinate with Indigo as far as what we can do inside their service territory. They have to allow us to do certain things.
Well, there's already a bus stop at the downtown transit center. So there really would be nothing new. And all we're changing is the way the vehicle operates once it leaves downtown and leaves the Indigo service area. When it's in the Indigo service area in Marion County, it is not doing really anything different. It's shuttling back and forth from downtown to Bridgeport Road, for example, or what we're proposing to change for Whitestown.
Well, that's an Indigo bus doing that. And then people get off
right,
that
but
bus.
The Indigo buses are picking up people along those routes, and we're not. We're only picking up people downtown and then to the edge of their network, which is the way the service works today, and then really focusing on getting people picked up and dropped off at the employers in each EID.
In theory, I like the idea, and we've discussed this. You've already presented, since Whitestown is one on this. 2 buses, first thing comes to mind is double price. So figuring that piece out, and then the transition to this, I think it's kind of a learning curve of almost running a 30-day overlap or something, to an understanding curve, I guess. Getting people to understand instead of just showing up at the bus stop. We've talked various ways looking at, and I think I'd really like to see looked at as we price this, the cost difference in if we, whoever, whether it's the local EID, CIRTA, own the buses, and contract the service rate. There's various grants out there, other methods to acquire the buses themselves. I know Whitestown's in position. We have a large fleet maintenance facility getting ready to get built. Can maintain our own vehicles, may require buying an extra bus, but looking at the cost, if we double the cost of this, and we're $1 million a year for cost, and we're only bringing in 600,000, that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely, Nate. And yeah, thanks for bringing that up about the fleet. I mean, we've obviously talked with you a lot about that. Plainfield, not so much, but there is an opportunity to reduce costs. It would be less expensive for one of your units of local government to own and maintain a fleet for this service, rather than leaving that to the private sector, who will obviously want to make some margin of profit on the service. So if it's just focusing on labor, that will reduce the overall cost of the contract and an opportunity for profit. So absolutely, we'll be looking at that as we finish out the project. We still have to do a risk assessment on the transition of the service, as well as looking at alternative funding options beyond the EIDs and the federal formula funds that are in place today.
What extent will the EID boards need to participate in this change?
A great question. We think they're critical to the decision-making process because without their financial participation, the services would not exist. I mean, you're all aware that CIRTA doesn't have a sustainable source of revenue to operate services. And so these contracts with EIDs, these agreements, and then the revenue that's generated through those special assessments is critical. And so we've made a very strong effort to try to reach and talk directly to the people that are paying for the service and try to get their, first of all, definition of success and agreement on that before we go down the road here with a service change. And then we'll absolutely, in fact, we're already on the Plainfield EID board agenda for the 22nd, and we'll be looking to make the same presentation there and with Whitestown and to get their concurrence.
You said previously the EID funds are increasing. Why are they increasing?
I'll let maybe Cinda and Nate kind of talk about that. That's their area of expertise. All we have is, the statements and budgets that show, that there will be revenue increasing over time.
Whitestone's EID is growing because we actually, when we established it, we brought a lot of ag land into the EID. We've got a lot of buildings that are still being built within it. Ours is more than doubled in the past 3 years, just because the revenue has, just because the AV within it has increased. For example, we've got an area that's 400 acres. It's ag land that has a zero valuation to the EID that's within the EID. And as soon as it develops, and it'll probably develop into anywhere from 300 to 500 million in AV, that alone will bring another 250 probably into 250,000 a year into the EID. So we modeled ours to grow. Obviously, we've talked and with Rick and others about legislation to expand even further the EID boundaries to bring other places in. But we took as much raw land as we could into ours with the intent of it growing in the future.
Cinda, would you like to
And assessments have just gone up, so.
It's all about AV. So as long as the community continues to grow and increase their AV, whether that be a new facility or updating facilities, that's how the revenue is generated.
Cost increases. I mean, it's apartments used to value in our area at $120, $120,000 a door. Now they're $158,000 a door. So if you have a multifamily and one, you just increased $38,000 a door in AV cost, and then that tax rate still stays the same. So
I'm gonna ask well, I'll call it the big question. Is, can a better level of service to either or both the existing EIDs operate with just the EID money? Or is it always gonna have some other government subsidy, which is what we're doing now to keep them going because of the price increase? To me, that's the bigger question. And if it's going to take more government money, where will that come from? The MPO? That's the question I have. Does anybody know that? Does anybody have a feel for that?
I think the issue is the price increase. It's, if you go back to our 3 year ago study, we could afford 100% right now with our EID. Just the economy took a spin and now we can't. And then as a downturn also, we lost a lot of ridership. So we're trying to gain that back and find the solution. Long term, I'd love to see it self-sustained. I'm not a fan of using government dollars to subsidize transportation, public transportation, probably wrong place to be for that, but.
And to be quite frank too, I mean, after we get through this COVID money and one additional year for Whitestown, we won't have any more government money to use for this. So it will have to be self-sufficient for the EIDs. And if it's not, then, then we'll have to adjust that situation when it gets there.
Is the fare structure, is that half the money? The fares, is it a third of the money?
It's not even enough to.
It's hardly worth it.
Yeah, the fare, we talked about abolishing the fare because we have 500 people, 500 rides a month. So you look at it, that's 6,000 rides a year. So $6,000 it's coming in out of a $600,000 service. So it's, if you could double the riders by eliminating the fare, it'd make more sense to the EID, because then the ridership is up and the benefit.
Yeah, what's unique about these services is that, being primarily funded by the landowners who have tenants who want to fill their workforce, because turnover is a problem, access to transportation in those locations is a problem. Right now, you're generating about 2% fare box recovery, so 2% of the total cost of service is covered by the current fare revenue of $1 per trip. We did do a quick analysis. We were not scoped to do a full fare study here, but we looked at some options, including the free fare option that we're recommending. And Nate's exactly right. Like, you can anticipate increased ridership, therefore increased benefit to the tenants of these areas, because the fare, by even being $1, it is a cash only transaction. It's every single trip to and from, and that does add up, when the wages are $18 to $20 an hour. So eliminating that, and there's nothing, regulatory that you have to charge a fare. It's completely up to CIRTA to decide that, and the stakeholders. And so if you eliminate that, it's very easy for customers to understand. There is a caveat there that once you get rid of the fare, it's hard to put it back. But it's going to probably increase ridership, because we've seen that throughout the parts of the US where they've done it system-wide or on a route. And it also reduces customer boarding time, because if you get 15 people downtown on that early express trip waiting to board, and they're all giving $1 in cash to the driver going through one door of the vehicle, that takes time. And so people just get right on and, on the way.
Sure. I mean, break it down the dollars, it's so our monthly expense before any grants, anything is 30,525. And we're just over 500 riders. You're $60 per ride is what we're paying for people to ride this. The dollar's insignificant in the big picture of it. I mean, it's something, but it's not gonna, is it $60 a ride? And that's where our pushback has been from people of $60 a ride. I mean, you can get from here to downtown or the furthest parts of Whitestown downtown on Uber for half that. So it's how they want to see the ridership numbers get up to where that balance is the dollars per ride makes more sense.
And we can address that with the software. So we can force rules that say more trips have to be pooled, which does exactly what Nate's saying. It brings down the cost per trip because you're putting more people on the vehicle. Now, it will impact the customer experience by really doubling down on pooling trips. They may be on the vehicle longer, but as long as they're getting to work on time and not having to walk as far to and from the bus stop, that's probably a win for them. So if we don't have any more questions, we've got a few more slides to cover, including the cost, which I know you want to hear. Real quick, we'll talk about this is what the services would look like. They're still essentially the same look on a map, although once you get within each EID, there wouldn't be a route per se. It will really sort of be the whole zone, and then you'll be picked up and dropped off basically at an address. We could use the existing bus stops exclusively, but we're not currently recommending that. And then, of course, one major change, and again, thanks to Nate for pointing this out early in our discussions, switching the connection point at the edge of Indigo's network to Lafayette and 38th, commonly referred to as 38th Street. There is a different bus service there. It's not necessarily more frequent, but it's also an area of town that has potential for ridership on its own rather than just as a connection point. And we did look at housing data and income data, and that is a connection that would be much better. It's also, if you're not planning to go pick people up or drop them off at 38th Street, having the vehicle go from downtown directly to Whitestown on 65 is more direct than going up to Traders Point and then going over. So it does make more sense if you're skipping the connection point for some runs. And just a little bit about travel time, because again, we did hear that as the predominant factor that people were concerned about with the current service. So this shows you if someone's going from downtown to the Amazon at Smith Road, and you would board Route 8 downtown to go to Bridgeport, wait a few minutes to connect, and then get on the Workforce Connector. So that's a total trip time of 67 to 69 minutes. And with a future service that we're proposing, you may wait around 10 minutes for the vehicle to arrive, and then it's simply 35 minutes directly to Amazon. And of course, that would fluctuate. But if all the passengers are going to Amazon on that run and need to be there by the start of Amazon's shift, then that they all get dumped off there and the vehicle doesn't have to cycle through the district, leading to a shorter travel time. And then with Whitestown, again, changing the connection point is key, but also just, it's a long way. This is a long trip. If you're going from downtown, an hour on Route 37, and here's where the schedules don't meet up perfectly because there are two bus routes connecting to the Workforce Connector at Traders Point. So you got to kind of pick which one works best. And that can lead to a 2-hour trip. And that's not accounting for someone who may be coming from, say, Northeast Indianapolis. That's an even longer trip. And from downtown to, say, the Cummins stop, which is not sort of one of the last stops on the loop, would be around 50 minutes, including the wait time. So a dramatic change. So again, travel time, more express trips, eliminating the additional transfers that are required between downtown and the EIDs. This demand response model can provide transportation more directly to more job sites and reduce that walking time to and from the static bus stops. and then only stopping at requested locations and eliminating that dwell time that's now required. Job access, of course, changing the transfer point attracts more employers from that 38th Street area to the EID jobs that they may need. And then again, more access to more job sites. And then as shift times evolve, whether it's seasonal or just, the company decides to change direction, then the service model will adapt to that. You don't have to change the fixed route schedule as you would today, simply to respond to different shift times. And then all of those would result in increased ridership. We're not guaranteeing that by any stretch. This is a hard thing. There are a lot of external factors. But if you improve the travel time, expand the hours of service, and increase the access to both potential customers and the jobs that they would be seeking, you can potentially see an increase in ridership. And then looking across the three different stakeholder perspectives, the customer, the EIDs, and then CIRTA, improving travel time and the customer experience are key, reducing the number of transfers, expanding the hours of service, and then that flexibility of adapting to varying shift times. And then we're going to be testing a new transportation model. There's a little bit of work going on with Indigo in this space, and then of course the more traditional dial-a-ride services that exist. But this will be something that will feel new and could be applied to additional communities that CIRTA is not currently serving today. So we talked about the fare, so we'll skip past that unless there are any questions. This is a key part of the service cost increase, and we really do feel that the restoration of the evening and Sunday service is critical to making this work for more people. If we do know that there are Sunday shifts, and so while the ridership was low, including in the evening, they are people, and so people getting to jobs. And so especially as the districts grow, the weekend and evenings may become even more important. And right now people are being essentially turned away because they can't reliably use that service if they're working, Tuesday through or Wednesday through Sunday, or some other variation that would require service after 7 or on Sunday. So we're really requesting that in addition to the 2 vehicles, that the actual span and days of service be extended back to its original pre-February schedule. Okay, cost. So we're recommending this alternative 1, which is to restore the Sunday and evening service. The Sunday service or the daytime shifts, the 5 to 10 and 1 to 7, would be recommended to have 2 vehicles. And then the evening, 9 to 11, 7 days a week, would be 1 vehicle. That does restrict the ability to go downtown, but again, with the lower ridership, we think that's a good trade-off with cost. So what you see here is the projected vendor costs currently for 2023, and then what alternative 1 would cost. This is a dramatic increase. There's no question about that. But what we heard was travel time, ridership. And so our analysis shows that investing in a second vehicle and restoring the night and Sunday service will get you both the reduced travel time, improved access to jobs, and the ridership that everyone's concerned about. There is a startup cost for the technology. CIRTA's admin fee, which is a percentage, would increase with the contract for service increasing. We expect that to cover the added technology cost. And then just for your comparison purposes, right, we're paying Royal $111 per service hour today. That alternate bid that used the smaller vehicle that was actually rejected for that was $99 per service hour. And we will definitely be talking to more potential vendors beyond Indianapolis who may be interested in operating this and asking them about flexibility in bidding and how they might structure a response and whether they would respond at all to a procurement. And then also for comparison, we've got from National Transit Database information, which is a few years old, as it often is, the demand response per hour costs for Indigo and the fixed route for comparison purposes. So they're running higher overhead, but that's to be expected for a more traditional, sort of mid-sized transit agency. Questions?
Question. Of the $864,000 that are projected for 2023, how much are we putting in from the grant to keep it going?
I think we have that, Katie, in here, don't we? Let's see. Is that the last slide?
That we can't keep doing.
Yeah. Yeah, here's, oops, hold on here.
I guarantee it's my last one.
Oh, shoot, I guess I have that hidden. Hold on just a moment. Let me unhide that slide and I'll show you. It's got all the details there. Okay, can you all see that? This table here in the lower left corner shows the contribution from federal formula funds. So Whitestown had a gap filled in with CARES Act, and then both services had 5307 ARP funds applied for this year.
So half of it, roughly half of it.
Yeah, and I think another thing we need to remember is that, CARES Act specifically was originally, when it was first applied for, it was also applied for something that was questionable if it was going to be allowed. And after further investigating what the scope, what you could use that funding for, I identified at that time that to use those funds for this purpose is exactly what that money was kind of intended for, if that makes sense, to help with the effects of the high inflation cost of COVID. So it made sense that we would use this money right now to be able to use this. So one, we didn't lose it. One, we could provide it back to the region. And then, so it wasn't necessarily, just to be clear, that, Plainfield and Whitestown were knocking on the door begging to use their dollars either. I mean, we heard from them that obviously they had concerns about the high cost, but I just want to make sure that's kind of helps paint the picture.
Well, I thought what you guys did now about a year ago to keep this thing going was really great. And it bought us time to figure this stuff out, but we're still facing something that there's no real answer for.
Yeah.
Long term, that's the thing, the hard part.
On our EID, we're waiting. We got the first disbursement, but the county doesn't know whether that's how much of that's people paid for the whole year versus they just paid their semi-annual. Semi. So we've got 315,000 with our July Form 22s. Based off of that, we should have $630,000 a year coming into our EID. That covers the current. We're at 470 or 432. We've got 42,000 somewhere. But Whitestown could sustain in 24 with what we have. The problem is the route isn't impressive to people, the numbers. So we want to get ridership up. We've got more businesses. But the 940, if you take our numbers, that's 300,000. It's going to the 5307, 300,000 you add it to, we're right at that number. So Whitestown could sustain the alternate one in theory, but once that money's gone, that $300,000, I don't know. It'd take a deeper dive with RFA just to see where we're at.
So we have to
2 years from now, because we don't want to kill the route and deal with inflation. And that's why I asked about the buses, because if the buses knocked 30% off that route, if we owned and we were able to knock that out now that we've got excess funds versus when we switch, trying to get that number down, the $100 an hour service hour.
is the 5307 through the MPO. That's going forward. It doesn't go through the MPO.
Yeah, so we only have one. The 5307 ARP money that you see on that graph is a one-time deal. The CARES Act is a one-time deal. So once that money is gone on those two grants that you see up there, there is no more. And that's why a part of this conversation also is if we, you know, in addition to exploring if a town or municipality would own its own vehicles and what that would all look like, is also to look at additional funding opportunities that might be available. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, so there's plenty of money on the table right now for vehicles. The biggest problem with that is getting them. This is an industry-wide problem. It affects big buses, little buses, electric ones, gas ones. There's just too many people seeking too many vehicles right now. But there is money on the table, and it's generous, and it's multi-year. So if you wanted to use those resources to acquire and bring down the operating cost, especially with a generous offer from Whitestown to house them and maintain them, we will probably recommend taking advantage of that because it does what we're talking about. It reduces the cost of service, and again, there's money on the table for buying those vehicles with an 80% match, federal match. So that's a good thing.
It's about a year plus because of Buy America, which support. But my point is it's backlog. So like if we're going to purchase our vehicles, which we do, and our vendor leases them for a year, but then they maintain them and insure them. So that could be potentially worked out. David, do you have any idea if we own the vehicles, how much I'd bring the hourly operating cost down?
We haven't done that analysis yet, but we will, because we think it's number one, you've got an offer for someone to do it. There's always the potential for CIRTA to do it, although that's a little bit more complicated because you don't have any infrastructure in place. So you'd have to find a facility. And we're not talking about a large fleet. I mean, the service today is covered by 4 vehicles. And if anybody's not been to Royal's operation, I mean, it's pretty small. And the vehicles themselves don't require a lot of space. You don't necessarily need to have fueling on site, for a fleet of 4. But those are all things that we'll be looking at.
Well, I think there's cost savings looking at if the Whitestown one's done through it. We're looking at putting in a fuel island. We get discounts on buying fuel. We get discounts on a lot of things. And if it's ran, definitely, I think worth looking into.
Yeah, and that's, it's a quick reminder here that, going with the smaller vehicle at least gives you the opportunity to also save on labor. So if you can address the vehicle and the fuel, which are, certainly a factor, but labor is your biggest factor by a long stretch. And if we can get the smaller vehicles and maybe some savings with labor, that's going to allow you potentially to restore some of that service or to operate 2 vehicles.
Does anybody else have any questions of David or Jen?
Well, real quick, I wanted to talk briefly about implementation.
All right. So David, thank you very much. Actually, no, it was good questions and they need to be asked. So thank you very much, David, and I look forward to getting reports and updates on this. No other questions. We'll go on to our next agenda item, which is sort of updates, legislative. Rick?
Thank you. My colleagues Pat and Abby are not here because downtown is hosting the National Association of Conference of State Legislators. So there's not only the Indiana delegation in town, there's thousands of other they're busy there. As the host, and a lot of our members are participating. Right now is the time where we have interim study committees, but it's been very, very quiet. The quietest I've seen in many years. In fact, hardly any have met this summer, and there's only a handful scheduled in September. One that's we're really keeping an eye on
is not technically part of that group, but they put in the budget some language to study transportation costs. And that was driven by the mayor of Indianapolis and Mayor Fadness and surrounding people to address some of the inequities that have developed over the years in lineal miles versus lane miles. We've talked about what those mayors have been convincing to others in central Indiana and other urban areas is that there's a significant disproportionate of funding to urban areas. And there was legislation to address that. It was agreed to drop that and put it into a study. I think the good news for us is that's going to be led by Chairman of Ways and Means Committee, Jeff Thompson, who's from Hendricks County, and Hendricks County is impacted by this imbalance in the formula. So I think we're going to see that. And it's also being driven by population shift, growth of electric vehicles, a lot of changes going on, a lot of conversation about vehicle miles driven, lane miles, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to be watching that closely. And timely with your discussion in this presentation, Jen organized a work group to get together of stakeholders. Nathan has been part of it, and our team, to discuss how we can expand EIDs by changing the law to allow other property owners to petition become part of an EID. As you recall, a few years ago, there was a big fight downtown Indianapolis. The apartment owners led a fight to stop the creation of a new one. A lot of criticism at the State House that all these things, what are they? How do we keep them from expanding too quickly? So we're going to go back and look at that and see if we can come up with some language that would just simply allow somebody, if they wanted in, to petition to become part of it. And it's a voluntary assessment that would help address some of these issues. I don't know if either of you two have anything to report on that, but
I've met with the individuals that told you what, and just need language. Right. I met with the legislators we talked about and just need language to present to them, and then they'll take it up the chain and back down to see, but they thought it only made sense. As long as it's super voluntary, it's not forcing it upon anybody. They liked the idea of it.
Good. Yeah, let us know when we can follow up with them. And
so sure, just need to get some kind of language to one in particular, and then they'll work on it. They'll run with it for us.
Okay. Your statement about the legislators being concerned it would grow too quickly, EIDs, what is wrong with growing quickly?
It's a great question. It's a great question.
I mean, when we're always looking at, things going down, I don't know if somebody could be against something going up.
They, it goes back to the atmosphere in that building that the people that elected them are brilliant. The people that elected you are not so smart. They just propensity to not want to trust local government, and then, oh my gosh, we give them this tool, they're going to abuse it. They're going to create a small one and then gobble up
kingdom building.
Yeah, but the point is this is voluntary. These are people that have said, we want to do this, we want a project. Kudos to CIRTA for helping get the first one started in Plainfield. It's a great tool. It's voluntary contribution to a project that they all collectively agreed on. Complaint from the Apartment Owners Association is that they get outvoted. Well, I think one could have a pretty sound argument that the demand for those apartments is directly related to the commerce that they're adjacent to. So anyway, happy to have any other questions or comments.
Thank you, Rick. Next up is the Executive Director's update.
Yeah. All right. So attached in, I guess the first thing I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention, attached in your packet is a flyer for Car Free Day in Dade. So coming up on September 22nd is International Car Free Day. Anybody throughout the region from now until September 22nd, they can register with us and win prizes and different things and get free transportation planning resources, carpool matches, information on how to ride Indigo, information on how to bike to work. To participate, we're encouraging people to go car free or car light if you're going to be downtown that day. Or in the area, we encourage you to stop by. We're going to be on Monument Circle by the new Spark green area on the circle, which is really exciting. We'll be there from 7 to 9. There'll be some free breakfast that our ad agency was able to secure. We'll have music, a couple radio stations, things like that on site. So we encourage you to share the word with people in your communities or your connections, and feel free to stop by. In addition to that, so my program managers today, one is on vacation and one is representing us well today at an HR roundtable event in Shelby County. So that's why they're not here. We have registered 247 new commuters since our June meeting and attended over 30 employer events with over 12 community events, and that is by being short-staffed. So that was pretty impressive considering that. School pool program. So for anyone who needs a reminder, school is kicked off for most of our communities. And CIRTA has a school pool program where we can work with any school throughout the region, whether just by getting some data, the families that belong to that school, and do free matches to connect them. And there's lots of benefits for that, right? Maybe they don't have a yellow school bus system. Maybe it's an issue of simple congestion. I know where I live on Oleo Road in Fishers, I have 5 schools within a couple minutes of my house, and the congestion and the carpool lanes are quite heavy. So we're in full swing with that. We just launched a direct mail campaign, reaching out to all of the schools and CIRTA's footprints. A copy of that direct mail campaign is in your packet as well. So if you guys know any schools or districts that are having issues or coming to you, please send them our way. We'd be happy to work with them and connect them on this program. FTA season, grant season, oh my gosh, it's finally done. Kudos to Dave. He's not here today, but kudos to him for working through his first grant season. He did a fabulous job of working back and forth with FTA. FTA said he did a fabulous job. So now that that is behind us and all the grants this year have been submitted, our PMTF grant season is starting where our PMTF grant is due, and we're starting to work on our budgets for 2024. So it's budget time for CIRTA. You will see a draft budget at the October meeting. We also, I was notified yesterday, just to kind of get you up to speed, CIRTA will be undergoing its first drug and alcohol audit with FTA. They reached out to us and will be on site at the CIRTA office on October 5th and 6th. And they basically come out and make sure our contractors are in compliance for all of the FTA requirements for drug and alcohol. And then I just want to thank Greg and American Structure Point, of course, for hosting this, and also for working with me as I am working with Rick and Patrick to go on a road show. They generously created a benefit of CIRTA marketing piece that I wish I had to share with you. It's sitting in my garage in the box I meant to grab this morning, but I'll share a digital copy with everybody. And thank you again. It was amazing. We worked, I shared them my vision, and they turned around a piece and delivered a product to me in like a week. So it was just a wonderful experience, and thank you to everybody for that. And then the last thing I just wanted to discuss, because this has come up, I know Nate's mentioned it and a few others may have mentioned it over time. As we move into 2024, I wanted to discuss board meeting dates and times. I guess we've always kind of strived to have our board meeting dates ideally around the second Tuesday of every month. Sometimes we have to move it if there's a conflict. We obviously don't want to move it too far later into the month because we don't want it to affect cash flow and those purposes for our clients. But I did just kind of want to open that discussion to see if I've heard from people, it would be nice maybe if the board meetings didn't start at 9 a.m. and maybe they started at 10 a.m. because traffic in the morning sometimes as we're commuting to different areas across the region can be busy and things to that extent. So this is just kind of a open conversation just to see if people really like the Tuesday ideal, really like the 9 o'clock ideal. If people don't have a preference, the last thing I want to do is change a board meeting dates and times though and not have a quorum. So it's obviously very important and critical that we have this conversation because look, at the end of the day, I'm flexible, right? But we want to make sure that, if there's an opportunity to improve the dates and times to make it easier for people, then.
Could it be something just looked at as you're doing the strategic plan, maybe, that way it's not just open. And the reason I brought it up is these meetings are the same time as our county council meetings. So if I have to present a budget and that's why I am the county rep, because all of our county officials have to be at the county meeting. That Whitestown has an EID and wants me here. But there may be other people that have kind of the same issue of if you have something going on or conflicting meetings within your county. And I just questioned it because of that, because I did have to miss meetings to be at budget presentations for the county. So just asked why it was where it was and so forth. But and it's one of those, well, it's always been that way, so that's what we kept with. But I just asked it.
Tuesdays do seem to be a popular day for board meetings. Tuesdays seem to be a popular day for board meetings.
Yeah, they do. And so we used to a long time ago, and I remember this, we used to meet in the afternoon. Sort of first started, told Jen it was on Friday, it was in the afternoon. Well, but it was everybody's schedule at that time, so it worked. But then there was discussion about it, and then it got moved to Tuesday, the second Tuesday, and it's kind of stayed that way. But like in your case, maybe in the afternoon on Tuesday might work, but it'd have to work for all of us if we were going to do that. So.
Well, the reality, it's no matter where you move it in the first 2 weeks, that's usually when most entities or all their meetings are at the beginning of the month.
Yep.
Everyone in this room, I'm sure you can put every date down, they're going to have a conflict date and time, but it's just, I questioned, has it been looked at? When's the last time it's looked at? You mentioned you and, Larry were on the board when it was changed the last time, may not have been anyone else. And we've all just kind of fell into, hey, this is when it is. But
actually, if they look at it in the strategic plan, if that's okay with you, then that's what we'll do, and just have David and then look at it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's easy.
My comment is the day of the week isn't as much of an issue as the time.
Yeah.
Because those of us it took me an hour because of the traffic to get here from Greenwood. And then if doesn't matter where it's at, if it's 7, I was here at 8:30 because I started at 7:30. Yeah. Because I wanted to make sure I got here on time. So I remember that back in the day when it was mid-afternoon, so we didn't hit the afternoon traffic. We met like at 1:30 or 1 o'clock, and then we could get back to our relative locations before the traffic. The traffic coming around for 65. For you guys too, probably an hour to get here.
I'm 16 miles away, and it took me 45 minutes for traffic. So
Actually, looking at from my perspective, I just leave earlier. The 10 works better because what it does is I get outside that morning rush.
Yeah, that's my point.
If there's an accident, I was here 25 minutes early today, and I left at 7:30, which is fine. But there's also a chance that I could be running to try to get here on time from wherever I would have parked. So it varies. So 10's a really good time because it pushes you just a little beyond that morning peak. Just depends.
We could also send out a doodle poll. Just see what everyone's preferences are and just kind of see. Go from there.
That'd be a good way to do it too. You guys want to have a strategic plan or have Jen sit down and do?
Either way, I just brought it up as a question, and
that's a valid question.
Just seeing where we were at on it, because
We can do it outside the strategic plan to survey the board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can do it a lot quicker too.
Yeah, just don't put Friday afternoon on.
yeah, no, I'm out.
We saw everybody's eyes when that was.
Hey, wait, you got a bunch of retired people here, plus a good bunch of government workers. You don't want to have it on Friday.
Well, I think originally they did it because it was just something that was convenient for everybody.
Patients we can.
Work on Friday. Yeah. It is bad if you want to take a long weekend. You know,
Friday afternoons are out, noted.
do we have any other matters? Jen,
No, that is all I have to update with you at this time.
Greg, I want to say thanks also for hosting us today. It's always great here.
Our AV stuff working. It wasn't working yesterday here.
Staff's always very gracious and I appreciate that.
Do we have a location on the next meeting?
Maybe at the CIRTA offices, yes. And then in Plainfield, in December. And as a reminder, please check your calendars now for the December meeting, because I need a quorum 100% in person to approve the budget.
December what?
Is it the 12th? Let me check. I believe it's Tuesday, the 12th.
It is. It is Tuesday, 12th.
Yes, Tuesday, the 12th.
Request. Then we have the copy of David's presentation today.
Yeah,
Can you see to get that sent out to the
not a
board?
problem.
All of us get a copy of the presentation today. You're gonna send it out to us. Okay. There's nothing else for us. Do you need a motion for adjournment?
Motion. Second.
Nathan, second by Andrew. Yeah. Without roll call, right?
Yeah.
Ann, can we do this without roll call?
Yes.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. I think we lost Cam.